Welcome to the Self-Discovery Files, a place for reflection, challenge, and becoming who you're meant to be. I'm your host, Dylan Phipps. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at @TheDylanPhipps for more daily insights. Enjoy. There's a specific kind of pressure that doesn't come from failure, right? Or being behind, or even struggling. It comes from knowing that deep down you are capable of more, and not in an inspirational way, but in an uncomfortable, right? The kind that shows up late at night, right? The kind that'll sit in your chest when you're alone, that you know that you have potential, right? The kind that doesn't scream at you, but it just kind of quietly nags at you, right? Welcome back to the Self-Discovery Files, okay? Today we're going to be talking about the burden of potential, okay? Because potential, it's not a gift as you might think. It's a debt, and whether you acknowledge that or not, the debt will collect interest, right? And for me, the place that I feel burdened the most right now is business. I know that without ego, right, I'm capable of building something real. Okay? Not someday, not like maybe. I can like literally feel it. And so that's why it weighs on me, because you could be great, but not yet being great creates a unique kind of pressure, right? That's more internal. It's not an external pressure. It's the tension between who you are today and who you know you could become, right? And so the dangerous part of that is that the tension doesn't go away on its own. Most people assume that the pressure comes from expectations that are placed on them by others. But the heaviest pressure that you'll ever feel, it comes from expectations that you put on yourself, even when you don't meet them, right? And so that's the burden. Now, the excuse that used to sound kind of like reasonable to me when it came to potential was, I would tell myself things like, I don't have the money, I don't have the tools, or I don't have the experience, or I'm building this from the ground up, right? Whatever. And on the surface, those do sound logical, right? You might look at your situation and be like, okay, like that's a genuine reason, right? It might be even responsible. But if we're being like honest and really honest, they're just delays dressed up as prudence, right? Because the truth is, experience is built by doing and not waiting. And I've learned that the hard way, right? Tools are earned through output, not excuses. And money will follow momentum, not the other way around. And so at some point, you realize that the real blocker isn't resources, it's identity, right? I talk about this a lot. Identity is such a big part of achieving things. It's the moment where you understand that if you actually try, there's a few uncomfortable things that happen all at once, okay? Number one, you lose the excuse of potential. Okay. Number two, you risk failing publicly. That's a risk that you have to take. Okay. You force yourself to become somebody different than you are right now. And the last thing is that you can't hide behind someday anymore, right? The illusion of someday. And that's scary, because as long as something stays unrealized, right, it stays perfect. Because potential is clean. It can't get criticized or judged, and it can't fail because it hasn't happened yet. It's just a perfect idea right now. But the moment that you act, potential turns into reality, and reality can 100% be evaluated. And so that's why so many people unconsciously protect their potential instead of trying to fulfill it and act on it. Okay? But there's something that people don't say clearly enough. Okay? The potential that stays unfulfilled, it doesn't stay neutral. Okay, it'll turn into guilt, restlessness, frustration, self-disappointment that isn't loud for yourself. It's just quiet, and it's not because you're lazy, it's because you're aware, right? And that awareness that you have is that debt. And the longer that you avoid paying that, the heavier it's going to feel on you. And so this is why people who, quote unquote, have so much potential often feel more pressure than people who don't, because potential creates responsibility. I know I had that all my life. I've had that told to me so many times. You have so much potential. You're going to do so many great things because of my intelligence or my ability athletically, right? My ability to be good at a lot of things. And it creates a pressure on you because now you have a higher standard. And if you didn't know you were capable of more, there wouldn't be any burden. Okay? Awareness is heavy. right? If you're ignorant, it's light. There's nothing really there. And so the moment that you become aware of your capacity, uh, life will start holding you accountable for it because you're aware of it. And so that's the part people try to numb with distraction and comfort, with planning, right, instead of producing, overthinking, right? But that burden doesn't go away. Okay, it'll wait. So this whole episode isn't about motivation or hype or believing in yourself. It's about understanding what potentially, like, your potential actually costs, right? And why avoiding that costs quietly erodes your confidence over time. Okay, because potential isn't asking you to dream. Okay, it's just asking you to act. And if you don't, the debt will stay unpaid. Okay? So now that we've defined that burden of potential, we need to talk about why people stay stuck carrying it, and the specific trap that keeps potential at bay from ever turning into your own reality. Because potential becomes dangerous when it stays hypothetical for too long, right? I said that. Not because ambition in yourself fades, but because the imagination will start replacing the execution that needs to take place. And so here's the mechanism that most people never notice. When something only exists in your head, okay, it's immune to reality. Okay? Like I said before, it can't fail, it can't be criticized, it can't expose your gaps within that field, and that makes it feel safe, right? But over time, the brain learns that thinking about doing something, it provides almost a small sense of relief without requiring risk, right? A small dopamine spike, a small like place of comfort, right? But planning activates competence without accountability, right? Research stimulates progress without resistance. And so that's just misdirected intelligence. Okay? And the trap isn't in the inaction of potential, it's the mental substitution that you put forth. So your mind starts treating preparation as performance instead of action, right? And at first this feels responsible, and then it becomes habitual. And eventually it becomes part of your identity and who you are. And that's when you become stuck. Because you stop being someone who is building something and you become someone who is thinking about building something. And here's where it gets subtle. Because potential creates this internal image of who you believe you are. Right? You have a mental image of who you think you are. And so execution tests whether that image is accurate or not. And you know that whether you like it or not. This is why people say that even those who fake being somebody who they're not, they know who they are deep down, right? And so as long as you don't test that, the image of yourself stays intact. And that's why people protect potential, because it's they're not doing it consciously, they're doing it structurally. Because there are a lot of things that happen very quickly once action actually takes place, okay? The skill gaps become visible, okay? You see what needs to happen, what should happen, what could happen, all of these gaps, right? Okay, second thing, inefficiencies show up, right? Feedback will enter your picture, and your own self-concept will get challenged, okay? And so that's the moment where most people stall, right? But not because they can't handle that work or the action that they're taking, but because they're not ready to renegotiate their identity. Okay? It's probably You could probably agree that it's easier to live as someone who could than to risk becoming someone who tried, right? Because trying collapses ambiguity, right? Ambiguity is comfortable, right? Clarity is super direct and confrontational. And so another piece of the trap is the identity delay, right? People assume that they'll become disciplined, capable, and confident in what they're about to do, and then they'll act, right? So they have complete confidence that they'll succeed. But in reality, the sequence runs the other way. Okay, identity is not a prerequisite that you need before action. It's actually a byproduct of what happens by taking action. So, waiting to feel ready is just waiting to feel like a different person without doing all the work that creates that person. And so this is where potential quietly turns into pressure. Okay, it's that low grade constant pressure that shows up as dissatisfaction, like a background dissatisfaction. It's a sense that time is slipping without a clear reason, um, or effort is just kind of being spent, but it's not necessarily being converted efficiently. And so nothing is technically wrong, right? But nothing feels right either. And so that's just misalignment. That tension isn't confusion. Your capacity is outpacing your output. And so when that happens long enough, your mind will start protecting itself, right? And so you start rationalizing. You think, I need better conditions, right? I should wait until I understand this more. I don't want to rush it. And each one that you say, they sound reasonable by themselves in isolation, right? But together they form that kind of containment system that keeps you stuck. Okay, potential stays sealed. The reality stays distant. And the gap between those two slowly becomes uncomfortable to sit with. Okay, and the key insight that most people miss is that the longer potential goes unpaid, the more painful it becomes to face. Right? That's why people distract themselves. That's why they overconsume information. They avoid the quiet moments, not because they don't care, but because the quiet reminds them of what they haven't converted yet. And so that's the final part of the trap. Potential doesn't sit there unused. It starts shaping self-perception. You begin to question your discipline, then your seriousness, then your credibility, right? It's not public, but it's internal. Okay? The problem isn't that you haven't succeeded yet. That's never the problem. The problem is that you haven't created evidence. Okay? Which brings us to the solution, right? It's not belief or confidence, like I said before, but it's a system that converts capacity into proof. That's where we go next. Okay? So I'll explain that potential doesn't turn into results through confidence, motivation, belief. It's simple, okay? It turns into results through inputs. And most people, uh, they fail here because they think that conversion is emotional. But it's almost objectively mechanical, right? Think of potential like stored energy, okay? Stored energy is useless until it's directed through a system, right? No system, no output, okay? So here's the system. The first principle, okay? Output creates identity, not the other way around. Identity does not create output, so you can't think your way into doing output. Most people wait to feel like the person before acting like the person, okay? That sequence is backwards. Identity will follow evidence. You don't become disciplined and then work, right? You work and then discipline becomes accurate. It's a byproduct. You don't become confident and then publish and release work, right? You publish and then your confidence becomes justified through that. Okay? Your potential will stay abstract until there's proof. Proof is what collapses the doubt. Okay? Which leads to the first kind of lever, right, that we want to pull. Okay? And that lever is output over intensity. Okay? The intensity of things feels productive. Okay? Output is productive. Okay, 10 hours of thinking, it produces virtually nothing. It doesn't produce anything. It might get you a little further, right? But it doesn't produce anything. But 1 hour of execution produces data. And so the system doesn't care how inspired you felt, right? It responds to what you shipped. So if you're carrying potential but you're not moving forward in any facet of your life, ask yourself one question, okay? What did I actually produce this week? Not what did you plan, not what did you think about, what you consumed, right? What did you produce? Output is the fastest way to surface what you don't know, what doesn't work, what matters, and what needs refinement. And because potential without output, it'll stay theoretical. Okay, but output will turn that theory and potential into reality really quick. Okay, so that was the first lever, right? Output over intensity, right? We want output. What are we actually executing upon? Okay, lever 2. Skill is built under friction. Okay, people overestimate preparation and they actually underestimate direct exposure, right? Because skills don't develop in controlled environments. They develop under resistance, right? Pressure accelerates learning. Leadership, communication, business, anything that you could think of that you can get better at as a skill, all of it improves fastest when mistakes are visible. Okay, and that's why people stall here. Skill building demands vulnerability. And so once output starts, the inefficiencies that you have become obvious, right? And that discomfort isn't a signal to stop, it's the signal that the learning curve has begun, right? Avoiding friction doesn't protect potential, it delays skill acquisition. So that was lever 2, okay? We have output over intensity, and we also have skill is built under friction, right? Not in a controlled environment, okay? And lever 3 kind of ties into that. Environment either collects or leaks potential. And this is the one that people kind of ignore the most. People don't really focus on the environment that they're in, right? Potential doesn't leak because you're weak, right? That you're too weak to act upon it, but it leaks because your environment allows it to, right? So your environment includes what you're exposed to daily, okay, who has access to you, how easy it is to default to distraction, and how difficult it is to avoid comfort, right? And so potential requires constraint, right? No constraint means no pressure, right? No pressure means no conversion. The highest performers, they don't rely on discipline alone, okay? They design environments that make the execution the default for that. And so if it's easy to avoid the work, the potential stays unpaid, okay? Don't rely on willpower. Design your environment to make it easier for you to take action and prevent the leak of potential. Okay, so that was the third lever. Environment either collects or it'll leak your potential. And so most people carrying potential are just coasting, right? And so there's kind of 4 kinds of coasting, if you will. And so this matters because each type requires a different fix, right? So the first type of coasting is comfort, right? This is the kind of coasting where life is fine, nothing is urgent, right? Growth kind of just feels optional. You're kind of content with where you're at, right? The second kind of coasting is fear coasting. You will stay busy with low risk tasks that kind of never expose you out of fear of doing a high risk task that has the chance to expose you. Okay. The third kind of coasting is chaos coasting, right? And so this is when you're active, but you're unfocused, right? The energy that you're producing, it goes everywhere, but results aren't kind of producing themselves because it's unfocused energy, right? You're not being direct. Okay, and the fourth kind of coasting is ego coasting. This is where you protect your self-image by avoiding situations where you might look inexperienced and be exposed. Okay, all of these are different traps, but it's the same result, which is that you have no proof still. Okay, and that gap that it creates, there's a rule that'll collapse that. Okay, and here's the simplest system that kind of actually works, and it's worked for me. Create one piece of daily evidence that you are who you say you are. Okay, it doesn't have to be a massive step forward. It doesn't have to be a super big breakthrough. It's just evidence. Okay, one page, one post, one concrete action, right? Because evidence compounds faster than motivation ever will. right? If you have 7 days of proof, that is going to do more for confidence than 7 months of thinking about what you might do and planning. And once that evidence starts stacking, the potential won't feel heavy anymore because it's finally being paid down, right? That debt that you have. But okay, there's a cost that you can't avoid, okay? There's no version of fulfilling potential, okay, that doesn't cost you ego, comfort, old routines, old timelines, old explanations, right, etc. That cost doesn't disappear if you delay. Okay? You can't avoid this because it'll just increase the more you delay it. Okay? Which brings us kind of to the final point that I kind of want to make, which is turning that pressure into precision instead of guilt. A lot of people feel the pressure of potential and they feel guilty because they haven't been taking action or haven't been following through. Maybe they've been staying in one of the four, kinds of coasting, right? Whatever the case may be, right? The final step is turning that pressure into precision instead of guilt. That's that close. And so at this point, the issue should be super clear. Okay, the problem isn't that you have no potential, or that you don't know what to do, or that you're incapable. The problem is that there's a gap between capacity and proof. And that gap between those two doesn't close by thinking differently. It closes by structuring your behavior differently. And so instead of ending this episode with an inspiration, okay, we're gonna end it with an audit. Okay? Not an emotional audit of how you feel right now, but a practical one, okay? I want you to take one area of your life. Okay, just one. Just do one at this point. Keep it simple, right? Where you know you're coasting. Okay, not where you're failing, but I mean coasting. Whether that's fitness, whether that's your career, whether that's skill development, whether that's money, whether that's faith, whatever it is, pick one, okay? And I want you to answer these 4 questions honestly to yourself. Where is my capacity clearly higher than my output? Okay? Not hypothetically, where is it tangibly? Okay, second question. What excuse do I keep using that sounds responsible or reasonable, but it delays action? Okay, this is usually framed as like timing or resources, some sort of preparation. Okay, the third one. What evidence would actually disprove that excuse that you keep using? Okay? Not a win, right? Not success that would disprove that, but what evidence? And the last question I want you to ask yourself, what single action could I repeat daily that would produce proof? And that's the core of it. Right there. You don't need a massive plan. You don't need confidence. You don't need a breakthrough. You need one constraint that forces output. Okay, which leads to the challenge, right? I always have these at the end of my episodes, a challenge for the next, however many days to help you out, okay? This one is a 7-day challenge that I came up with, okay? So the 7-day challenge that I have for you is for the next 7 days, I want you to choose one area, okay? Choose one daily proof action. Right? Make it small enough that it's unavoidable, right? But make it concrete enough that it can't be faked, right? And then do it every single day, no matter how you feel, right? No stacking up, no using excuses, right? No saying like, oh, I'll just do 2 tomorrow, double up tomorrow since I missed today, right? No renegotiation with yourself, just proof. And the goal isn't momentum or success. The goal is alignment, because when your actions start matching your capacity, the pressure will change, right? The potential that you have will stop feeling heavy, and the guilt that you have will stop lingering, right? Not because life got easier for you, but because you stopped carrying unpaid responsibility. Okay? And the final truth of this episode that just came to mind is that potential does not make you special. Okay? Fulfilling that is what makes you credible. Right? Everybody has capacity, but few people actually convert it. They're the ones who do convert it, they aren't more talented. They're just more willing to live without excuses. So if this episode made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort you feel isn't self-criticism, okay? It's awareness. And so awareness is that starting point, not the end, okay? Pay the debt, create proof, and then let those results speak. That's how the potential that you have stops being a burden and it becomes a foundation for yourself. So, thank you for listening to the Self-Discovery Files. This was episode 9, The Burden of Potential. If you haven't checked out my social medias, check out my TikTok, check out my Instagram. We're going to be building more. I'm releasing these every single week. We've taken a little break from TikTok just because we're planning a little more things. I've had a couple of things going on. But we're definitely planning more for content. Going to be helping you guys out a lot. If you haven't tuned into the podcast, subscribe right now. We release episodes every single Monday at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time or 12 p.m. Eastern. So stay tuned for those episodes. And yeah, thanks for listening. We will see you next week for episode 10. Thanks for listening to the Self-Discovery Files. My name's Dylan Phipps. Keep showing up for yourself, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep becoming who you're meant to be.